Welcome. My name is Lisa, and I'm the founder of the Central Oregon Flower Collective. As we start our fourth year this year, we're so excited to share that we are embarking on a new adventure, education. We held our very first virtual cut flower conference back in February, and now we are jumping into the world of podcasting. So whether you are a beginning flower farmer, or you've got a few years under your belt, or maybe you're just a flower junkie and you love to talk all things flowers, we hope that you'll join us on this new endeavor and come along, and maybe you'll hear some interesting conversations. Let's dig in. Hello, welcome everyone to our very first podcast. In this very first episode, we're actually going to be kicking off a series called Flower Farming as a Side Hustle. And I'm absolutely thrilled today to welcome Lindsay Wiley from the Littlest Flower Farm. She was one of the first farmers to join the collective, and was that back in 2022, I want to say? Was that the first? Yeah, I think that was the first year.
I think so.
Right? Yeah, I think it was.
2023.
Oh gosh, time flies. So anyway, I'm absolutely thrilled to have you here, Lindsay. And so I thought maybe we would just sort of dive into your experience as having a full-time job as well as doing some flower farming on the side. So maybe let's start with a little bit of background, and maybe you can tell me a little bit about your business and where you grow, and then we'll kind of just dive in from there.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Lisa. I love chatting with you always. I'm Lindsay. I am the owner, grower, doer of all things at the Littlest Flower Farm, which is my business. I grow in my backyard in a very small space here in Bend, Oregon. I live on a third of an acre, which isn't huge, but it's enough space. And my garden is probably, I don't know, a quarter, a fifth of the yard space that we have. So I'm still very small. I work a full-time job in marketing and do this as a side hustle.
Wow. So, okay, then maybe let's talk a little bit about how you actually got into growing flowers. What kicked you off and when?
Yeah. Yeah. So I started gardening in, I believe it was 2020. And I was really kind of focused on growing veggies and herbs. And I read Lisa Mason Ziegler's book. I can't remember what it's called. It's like Tomatoes Love Flowers or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And was learning about companion planting. And so with all of the little plans that I have mapped out for these 4 beds that you see here, I was pairing flowers with veggies and herbs with veggies. And getting into it, I really figured out that, a tasty tomato is always going to be something I want. I really loved growing the flowers. From there, over the course of it'll be 6 years this year, I've just expanded more and more flowers and getting into it and learning about varieties. So the tomatoes still have a space in my garden, but they've been kicked out of the flower beds, and so now it's purely flowers when I grow.
Oh, fabulous. All right, so that sort of shifted you in mostly to flower farming only with just veggies on the side. So you really kind of have a veggie side hustle to your side hustle, it sounds like.
I do. Yeah.
Okay, so when you were starting out, I'm gonna do some more pictures here. What were some of the challenges that you faced when you were setting up this?
Oh man, for the space.
Yeah.
Well, I guess when you start, you don't really know what's to come. So as my interest in growing flowers progressed, the size of my space increased. So I built out the beds. When I started, I didn't have any sort of drip irrigation installed. So that was something that, came later. My husband and I moved our fence out so that I could add to that. But really, when I started growing and gardening, really, it was for fun. And as I grew my space and added more and more flowers, it became so big that I had a lot to share and wanted to share. Um, and as you get into growing flowers, you learn a lot about how many flowers, cut flowers, are imported into the US. I think it's around 80% right now. And they travel really long distances and they're heavily treated with chemicals and they're really kind of covered with things that we should avoid smelling and putting in our noses and bringing into our homes or gifting a loved ones. I wanted to contribute to the local flower movement. And while I'm very, very small, I'm really happy to be part of the collective and contribute to the local florist industry. So, yeah, challenges in starting out were a lot of just what comes with a natural learning curve. Every year, I learn something new. Um, so, early on with all of the infrastructure that came with a lot of challenges and learning. This is a progression. I believe this was 2022, I want to say. So I started building out the beds, figuring out my crop plan, and my spacing of plants is a challenge to figure out. You kind of have to learn as you go. I really didn't understand and fully grasp. I knew soil was important to gardening and to growing flowers and really growing anything, but I had no idea what the effects of soil would have on the health of my plants and pest pressure and all of that. So I think that was a big challenge too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's always surprising to people that so much of our flowers that we can buy at the grocery store or at your florist or whatever, that like you said, 80% of those come from out of the country. And, you just don't really know what those have been doused with as far as the chemicals. And I know there are a lot of restrictions for them coming in. So, local flowers is where it's at. So then let's maybe chat a bit about, so you're growing all of these beautiful flowers and you have lots of extras. What was the deciding factor for you to decide to start selling them and then coming into like the collective? What were the
Yeah.
early steps in that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I wanted to find a way to share them. I also wanted to try to break even was an initial goal of it takes a lot of investment to build these things, to buy all of the dahlia tubers and start collecting. So I was motivated to make it a side hustle and figure out how to grow a business really is my goal. I work a full-time job. I don't have a lot of flexibility. I'm in an office a lot. So mornings, evenings, weekends are dedicated to this. So when I wanted to kind of shift gears from taking this from a hobby to a side hustle, meeting you and finding the Flower Collective was such a great outlet for me because I had built-in support and community and mentorship to be able to grow and sell locally without having to figure out how to do it all on my own. Um, so that shift was really motivated by my wanting to share, but also wanting to learn how to grow a business. With the little, I want to take it further. I want to have a giant farm or a bigger farm. And part of what I'm trying to do in starting an LLC and really trying to get it set up as a proper business is learn small. So the mistakes and lessons that I learn now are smaller. So, if and when I'm ready to buy a farm and grow my space and grow my business, I have a solid foundation and understanding of what it takes to have a cut flower business.
Okay, so that's interesting. You brought up LLC. Do you remember what your thought process was at the beginning, and how far into that beginning journey did you decide to go the LLC route? And do you have any sort of advice for anyone maybe who's just starting a flower farm as a side hustle? Maybe they just want to grow some things in their backyard. How did you progress to forming your business and deciding on LLC structure?
Yeah. Yeah. Because I have, I guess, the foresight that I want this to be a big business, I wanted to establish it as early as possible. So I definitely didn't need to have an LLC, but part of the motivation of doing that and not just, having a DBA kind of business, um, there's a lot of lessons to learn and a lot of business, I don't know, savvy to bring into the mix. So that was part of it, is just wanting to understand and learn. Um, and yeah, I think that there's a lot of options. I guess the advice I would give to somebody who's considering it is, why are you considering it? Is it liability? Is it wanting to have that business structure and learning and growing? Or, you certainly don't have to have that to grow flowers and sell them. So I think it's kind of an individual decision to make.
Yep, I think you're right on that. There are a lot of different ways you can structure it. And if you're just starting out,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it is easier just to do it as a DBA. And but I think you're
Yeah.
right in that, sort of look ahead to what your goals are and what you're thinking about for the future, and set yourself up in a way that you build a good foundation early on. So like you said, you're not making big mistakes later. You can make all the small mistakes ahead of time and sort of get those out of your system, and then you can build
Yeah.
your nice foundation and go from there. So,
Yeah.
okay, I'm going to pull up another picture here. So this pretty early on too?
Early on.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to say it was 2021 or 2022. As most growers, gardeners, flower enthusiasts know, once you get started, it's a snowball going down a
Yeah.
mountain. It turns into an avalanche. So over the
Yes.
years, I've found little nooks and corners and ways to add in some beds. But yeah, this was kind of a midway point where I started getting pretty serious about it. I think this is right around the time, probably after this growing season, when I decided that I wanted to go bigger. This is a photo from this past season in 2024. So
Wow.
I've definitely found my niche in growing dahlias. I definitely grow other varieties as well, but I'm around, I think right around 200, 150, 200 dahlia plants this past year. And this year I'll be at closer to 240, 250.
Wow.
And yeah, it's a flower I love growing. It's super challenging to grow, especially here in Bend. We have
Yeah.
to dig and
Yeah.
divide and store them. But as a business, it's also another revenue stream. So I'm able to grow the dahlias as cut flowers. And this year I'll be having my first online dahlia tuber sale. So I'm really excited
Super.
to do
Super,
that.
super.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
we can jump in and talk about that a little bit now if you want to, while we're looking at these beautiful dahlia pictures here, and then
Sure.
we can come back and chat about some other things. Let's see. I've got another slide here. Look at these. My gosh.
Yeah. It's
Wow.
another view. I know they're so pretty. They're so
Oh.
pretty.
So how did the dahlia bug get you?
Gosh, I think the same way it gets everybody else.
Yeah.
Year one, bought dahlia tubers, I don't know from where, big box store.
Mhm.
They were beautiful. I dug them up in the fall. Some of them were diseased, and I started learning about buying dahlia tubers from smaller growers. And once you start, you don't stop. So I've collected a lot of varieties. Last year, I trialed a lot of varieties, and this year, My focus is really on growing fewer varieties and more quantity for the local florists. So I think I'm honing in on which ones I love, which ones grow well in my yard, in my little microclimate.
Okay, so you're going to be doing your first Dahlia tuber sale this year. So, and we'll have all of this information in the show notes if anybody is interested in checking this out. Tell us a little bit about maybe some of the varieties you're going to have and how your sale is going to be structured.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Well, that's okay. Which which varieties? There's so many things that are coming to
So
mind right
many.
now. I know. Well, the one that everybody seems to want that I am able to offer in a decent quantity is Calgian. Calgayan. I don't know how to
Yeah,
pronounce it. Calgian. It's a beautiful water lily variety. It has done really well for me. Some people say it's not a great tuber producer, but for me, it has been. So I'll be
great.
able to offer that. Yeah, I'm actually going through my inventory this week ahead. So I'll know more of which quantities I have. But yeah, I have a lot of ball varieties. I do have a couple water lilies, but they're all just so beautiful. I tend to be drawn more towards pinks and lavenders. I have a couple whites, which is forecasted to be a wedding trend for this
Yep.
summer. A lot of white and
Yes.
green
White and green.
weddings.
That's the name of the
Uh-huh.
game this year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
So I'll have a couple of really beautiful ones. I also am really drawn to just kind of the funky ones. Double Jill comes to mind. It grows, each bloom is unique, and it's sort of this swirl of oranges and blushes and yellows, and
Oh,
it's just so
nice.
pretty. Yeah, I love those too.
So probably
But
if I asked you what your favorite dahlia is, sort of like favorite children, you probably wouldn't have one, or would you have one?
no, I love them all.
Yes,
Yeah, I
that's what everyone says.
yeah, yeah. I let's see. I would say the most surprising one that I tend to love is American Dawn. It's pretty easy to get. It's sort of a raspberry purple toned flower, but it has the strongest stems. It makes awesome tubers that have a ton of eyes, and it is just so rock solid and so beautiful. It's fun to see when I have a friend over or a family member who's in the garden. That one always stops them in their tracks and they ask me about
Oh,
it. So I think that's probably one that's underrated that I would recommend for people wanting to add dahlias. Um, the ones that did really well for me and just bloomed and bloomed and bloomed this summer were Christian Honey, which is a ball dahlia. Rock Run Ashley and Rose Toscano were really great for me. Um, Ironically, some of them didn't store well for me, which
ah,
might have been user error on my part. I think they might have been a little too wet still when I stored them. But, anyways, I'm hoping to have plenty of those again, and I'm working on doing some cuttings. But
okay.
with the Dahlia sale too, thinking about the Littlest Flower Farm as a business, I've learned so many lessons about what it takes to sell Dahlia tubers, and each state has different regulations and rules, but in the state of Oregon, you have to have an inspection and a shipping certification from the Oregon Department of Agriculture. So um, that is on top of our nursery license that we need to be able to sell tubers and seedlings. So I've been learning a lot about licenses and inspections and all of the things that you need to do to um, sell and ship in the right way. So that has been a pretty big learning curve for me. And then on top of that, last year I sold some starts locally, but selling and setting up shipping online. I'm using Squarespace for my website right now and having to figure out, how do you get your site set up so that you're adding the right shipping costs? How do you incorporate state taxes that are required for sales? All of those things I've been chipping away at over the winter and trying to learn. So it's I would say this year has been probably my most challenging, because on top of just seed starting and, taking care of little baby plants, I'm also trying to figure out all of these processes that are so new to me. So it's been it's
That's
been fun.
that's a whole other full-time job, I think, is discovering
Hmm.
all the things you need to know to ship. And like we do our wholesale website through Square, and so I had to do the same thing. I took several months to have to learn how to really navigate that and make sure it's set up correctly. And there's not really a lot of places you can go, especially like for a Dahlia tuber sale. What do you even Google, to learn how to do that? It's unfortunately a lot of times I think it's just trial by fire. You have to just jump in and you have to figure it out for yourself. But
Yeah.
I know that's
Yeah.
challenging with a full-time job plus the flower farming, and now adding on a tuber sale on top of that, because that really is a whole other side business to your side hustle. So,
It
um,
is. It is. It
yeah,
sounds so easy in
yeah,
theory, I want to be able to share these with more people and I have so many
yeah,
extras, and sure, I'll just sell them online, but to do it the right way or in a
yeah,
compliant way is a whole other beast. So
yeah.
yeah, I'm definitely learning that lesson right now.
Okay, I'm gonna zoom through some more photos here. This is a beautiful overview shot.
Thank
So,
you.
um, okay, so let's maybe talk a little bit about the whole side hustle part of it, and kind of maybe talk a little bit about how you balance working a full-time job with trying to farm flowers in the evenings and early mornings and weekends, and maybe what does a typical week look like for you? And I know you do sell wholesale through the collective, so that's
Yeah.
a whole other thing that you do. So kind of walk us through how you function in a week.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I'm figuring it out. The first year I started, I was trying to do a little bit of wholesale and a little bit of retail and some little pop-up shops here locally. And I think dabbling was a nice way for me to figure out what I can do with my schedule. So, with my current full time job in marketing, I'm in an office Monday through Friday. It's pretty much 9 to 5, give or take. So for flowers, I really am able to dedicate my time in the mornings before I go to work, at night when I get home, and then definitely on the weekends. I'm spending a lot of time working in the garden or preparing things or doing things like working on my website. So like you said, I'm mostly focused on growing wholesale as of this past year and this coming year, which seems to be working out because it's a schedule that I can plan the rest of my schedule around. So we have a, a dedicated day to uploading your stem counts for our florists. I have a dedicated day when I know I have to have all of my stems cut and bunched, and have a morning where I need to figure out how to drop off my blooms before I have to go to an early meeting. So so far it's been easy-ish to integrate into my full-time job schedule, but on the weekends, I'm doing a lot of maintenance in the garden, planting, deadheading, weeding, fertilizing. I'm kind of constantly cutting stems. I have a little cooler in my garage where I can store some processed stems for the wholesale delivery. Excuse me, in the week ahead. And um, in the mornings, I have a really nice routine of just bringing my coffee out there, checking on the plants. My dogs come with me to check on the plants, we call it. So I can cut some stems them and, just kind of chip away at it a little bit of time, at a little bit of a time. A little bit, what does that say?
A little bit at a time?
Yeah, a little bit at a time. I don't know why that sounds so funny. But yeah, when I get home from work, I have a newfound hobby that has come with this side hustle, and that is taking photos of my flowers.
Oh,
Golden hour,
yeah.
in the evenings or sunrise in the mornings is the best time of day to take photos. Usually out there taking photos and videos for Instagram or my website or the wholesale photos. I kind of tuck in jobs here and there as I can, mornings, evenings, weekends, and just try to get into a routine. And I think that helps me get everything
Yeah,
done.
I think that's probably key for anyone who does have a 9 to 5, because obviously that's a very structured time. And if you can make your side hustle be just as structured, like you said, then you know exactly what days you have to do what. And, that probably helps. And it does help to have a cooler. I will say anybody who's trying to do flower farming, having a cooler or a place to store your stems really gives you a whole lot more flexibility on your timing.
Yeah.
So there would be a
Yeah.
whole other level of stress if you didn't have a way to hold stems for a few days. There'd be sort of a mad dash to get things harvested and conditioned and then out the door pretty
Yeah.
quickly. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I guess as an aside, learned a lesson this past year. I grew 2,000 tulips and was storing them
oh,
all for Mother's Day. And my cooler is pretty small. It's a single door, and I ran out of space, so I had to phone a friend, flower friend, who had some space in her cooler, and I was able to store my tulips over there. But sometimes the things that you don't think about until you need to are just like
right.
good lessons to learn.
Yeah.
This year I'm
Always.
growing fewer of
Yeah.
those.
Yeah. I think that's key is, learning
Yeah.
from those lessons, because every season you're going to get hammered with lessons. And I think
Yeah.
I still haven't learned the lesson to really rein it in and grow fewer varieties and more quantity, because like most of us, I think I look at the seed catalogs or I'm in a seed rack in a store and, oh, I've never grown that before, and I grab that and I grab that, and
Yeah.
it's it's really hard to not do that. But someday maybe I'll
It
learn that
is.
lesson. I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll
Yeah. And
see.
I think that's why it's important to focus on the things that you can sell and the florists want,
Mhm.
but also you have to love growing it. I
Yeah.
love growing dahlias and I love growing cosmos. And so marrying those two things of what do the florists want that they can't get from a bigger wholesaler?
Right.
And what is it that you love doing? Because you're spending, for me, all of my free time
Right.
doing this. So I want to love what I'm growing and I want to love what I'm doing. And I think our florists really can tell that so much care goes into growing the flowers that we do and providing them. So I think
Yeah,
that's
I
important.
agree.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, okay. So all of this talking about the scheduling and stuff, have you encountered burnout with trying to do so many things? Because I know a lot of flower farmers who flower farm full time, a lot of us run into burnout pretty easily. And so it's really hard to imagine having to put a full-time job on top of another full-time job of flower farming, because, flower farming, you can't just set it and forget it. You've got to be, like you said, out there mornings, evenings, all weekend. Have you encountered burnout in the past? And if so, have you figured out any ways to sort of manage it or try to avoid it?
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. I have. And for me, I think it probably comes more from my full-time job. But the marriage of the two and, things going on in life can reach that peak moment where it's just too much. And for me, what I've really learned is that I need to take time off when I start to feel that creep in. If I try to push through it, it just gets worse or gets delayed. And, you kind of have a emotional meltdown and tears and you're just exhausted and really get to a point where, nothing is really that fun. Um, and so for me, what I've figured out is I just need to take a break, usually time off work, taking a vacation, allowing my brain to shut off from, thinking ahead all of the time is exhausting, which I do at my full-time job. There's always problem solving. There's a need to be really creative and, be on top of project management. And for flowers, it can be the same. It is a job if you're selling flowers. So yeah, for me, it's just really about being mindful of when you're starting to feel that way, taking time. I'm really trying to do a better job of just taking care of myself all the time and taking breaks, exercising regularly, getting a lot of sleep, trying to eat nutritious food and just kind of fueling myself. So, it's a constant, just a bug. It's a constant practice. I had a yoga teacher once say that balance is never static, it's always dynamic. And that has always stuck with me. And that, a lot of people talk about finding balance as if you'll reach this point and everything will be perfect. But it really is a practice of finding balance through the dynamics of life and adjusting where you need to adjust. So I think another thing that we can do is just take the pressure off of ourselves of it's never going to be perfectly balanced. It's just finding that happy medium where, you can be your best self and you're having fun. And one thing I would recommend too, for somebody who's doing this as a side hustle, one thing that has helped me greatly is in setting goals. So with flower farming and having a business selling cut flowers, there are going to be so many things to do, from wholesale to retail to weddings and pop-up shops and selling tubers and flower starts. And I think if you go into the season and into your business with a clear vision of what goals you want to accomplish and what you want to focus on, that really helps you navigate through all of these things, exciting things and shiny objects that are going to come your way. And you want to say yes to everything and you want to share flowers as much as possible. But if you're able to kind of know what you're trying to accomplish, that helps you make decisions a little bit easier and I guess have a clearer path forward where there's not as much noise coming in.
Yeah, I think that's good advice because, like you said, the shiny object syndrome, I mean, I think we probably all have a little touch of that. And especially if
Yeah.
you're starting out and you don't know what works for you and you don't know what you're going to enjoy doing. And I think it is important to explore all of those things. But I think also you need
Yeah.
to realize you can't do it all and you can't do everything that you want to do. And maybe, experiment for the first couple of years. And then, like you said, set your goals and then do the things that bring you joy and that work for you and work for your schedule.
Yeah.
So, since you mentioned goals, let's talk a little bit about maybe some of the goals that you've set for the Littlest Flower Farm, maybe some financial goals or time management goals, or what are some things that you've been thinking about for your business for this season?
Yeah. Yeah. Financial goals, it's kind of simple. I want to be profitable, to have a business and to have a business bank account. You do have to be
Yeah.
profitable. So That is one goal. Yeah, that's one goal I have. And then it's a little bit less about the income right now. And going back to what I mentioned earlier, I want to learn how to operate a business. So um, finding ways to be profitable and then tweaking those revenue streams to continue to grow year over year is part of my financial goal. But beyond that, for this year ahead, I have 4 goals that I'm working towards. So the first one is to sell Dahlia tubers online. So I mentioned that I'm having my sale soon, hopefully in the next couple weeks. I'll be announcing that relatively shortly. But I have my inspection. I'm learning about the certifications for shipping and the ODA and all of that. So that is a big goal and lesson for me to learn. The second is focusing on soil health. There's a lot that I've learned from podcasts that really I haven't had a ton of opportunity to put into practice. So I'm really focusing on soil health this year and learning and practicing some of the tips and tricks that other flower farmers have shared. Focusing on record keeping. So I think most of us start the year strong. We're bored in the winter and create plans and spreadsheets and take notes. And then as the season progresses and we get busier and busier outside, record keeping is a lot harder to do. So, yep. Yeah, that's been a continued focus year over year. So that's one that just stays on my goal list.
Yeah.
And then the last one is to put myself out there more. So I tend to be uncomfortable talking about myself, being on photo and video. I'm very much a person who likes to be behind the scenes, which is funny because I want to share my flowers. I want to connect with community, but I guess I'm a little bit shy in that way. So pushing myself out of my comfort zone is something that I'm trying to do a little bit more.
Well, you're doing great. This is awesome.
Thanks.
Okay, I think I've got another. Is that the last slide? I think that's the last slide. So, let's maybe. I know you've talked a lot about some of the lessons that you've learned, and so maybe you could tell us what's the favorite lesson that you've had over the last few years, or maybe the biggest lesson that you've had. What has really spoken to you as a big one?
Yeah. One of them is to not doubt myself. So when I started really getting into gardening and growing, and I started to learn how to grow from seed, I had this very silly thought of this isn't going to work, that I'm going to try to start these seeds and it's not going to work for whatever reason. And of course it worked. So I think just overall, one of the big lessons I've learned is to not limit myself before I try something. Part of growing and becoming more of an expert is doing. So, yeah, it seems so silly to say, but I think a lot of us probably do that for various things in our lives. And that is a real limiter in terms of being able to grow and being able to scale. And it's, try it, I guess, is one lesson I've learned, and don't doubt yourself. I think the other one that I've learned, which has been so nice, is that if you reach out to your community, they'll reach back out to you. So connecting with, the collective was intimidating at first because I was so small. I am so small. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be in the company of these real farmers who have big growing spaces, and who am I to be part of that? But was very much welcomed with open arms. Thank you for that. And yeah, I think the rest of the community too. I've connected with neighbors in ways I wouldn't have been able to without sharing garden starts or bouquets or just, whatever I have to give them. So that's been really nice. And I've had a chance to connect with other businesses in the community. There's a coffee shop in town called Back Porch that has allowed me to do some pop-ups, and they were so welcoming. They have been so welcoming. So I think for somebody who is, a little bit shy, that's another good lesson of just putting yourself out there and making the introduction and reaching out. I guess those are two of my favorites.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think a lot of people really struggle with, especially at the beginning, with maybe reaching out to a local business like the coffee shop. What was it that really jump started you to be able, especially if you're an introvert, how did you
Mm-hmm.
decide to go approach them, and what did you do? What were your first steps in reaching out to a place like that?
Yeah, I had a pretty clear ask that I wanted to make. I wanted to do a pop-up shop. I wanted to do a pop-up outside. I go to their coffee shop a lot, so I knew this grassy area that they had that would be perfect to set up a little tent and table. I knew when I wanted to do it. I knew what I would have for sale. So I just emailed them and reached out and said, "Hey, would this be of interest for you to host a little pop-up shop? I think it would be nice for the community and people would be interested." And so they responded and said, "Yeah, that sounds great. Let's have a meeting to talk about it." And we did. So I think I've been there 2 or 3 years in a row now. And it's been fun. And I have people that look forward to me coming back and will scout me out online now and say, "Hey, are you going to be bringing your starts to Back Porch?" So, um, yeah, it was very easy to have that conversation, but that's partly because they're so great and so lovely to work with. So I got lucky.
It's maybe a good tip there is to maybe, approach someone that you already have sort of a relationship established with, some like a coffee shop that you go to regularly. They know your face and, they know that you support them. So maybe it's a natural progression that if you ask them, they're going to want to support you in return. So maybe that's a good place
Yeah.
to start, is some place that you frequent and already have something established with.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Totally.
and so you never know. I mean, until you try. Might as well
Yep.
throw it out. What's the worst thing that can happen? They say, no thanks. Okay, then move on to something else.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually had a different business I had reached out to, and it was a no, but it was a no because one of our florists in town was a couple doors down from them. And I can't remember what it was. Maybe it was, cut flowers I was wanting to bring and pop up and sell. And um, they were so kind with their response. And the context of it was like, "Oh, yeah, of course. You don't want me to come bring my flowers because your neighbor is a florist. That makes so much
Yeah.
sense." Um, and they were so generous of wanting to try to, support me and said, "Well, we have some planters outside. Do you want to help us plant some flowers, or like what else could we do together?" So, I think, yeah, just send the email, make the call, have the conversation, and you'll be pleasantly surprised with the response that you get back, even if it is a no. It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think you're right. Well,
Yeah.
okay, as we kind of wrap up a little bit, maybe let's have you give just a little bit of advice for maybe someone who's got a full-time job now and they really want to get into flower farming. Maybe they have a backyard in an urban setting like you do.
Mhm.
Maybe what advice would you give someone?
Yeah. I think the biggest piece of advice is start small. Try to avoid that overwhelm of financial investment, because there is a learning curve that just comes from practicing the knowledge that you've absorbed. And, we read a lot of books and listen to podcasts, and we feel prepared, which is great, going into growing and selling cut flowers. But until you do it, there's a whole set of other lessons that you have to learn. So if you're able to start small, if you're able to focus on, maybe one sales channel, do that, because you're going to learn so much, and you're probably going to be able to grow a lot faster if you don't have a shotgun approach to doing everything at once and learning everything at once and becoming overwhelmed. So I think just focus, goal setting, start small, know that, 1, 5, 10, 20 years in, there's still going to be lessons to learn. That's just part of the job. So yeah, that's my parting advice for anyone who's starting out. And, I'm still very new and I'm still learning daily.
Wow, this has been awesome, Lindsay. Thank you so much for sitting down and having this conversation with me. So tell me a little bit, where can people find you? And then maybe a little bit about your tuber sale, when you think that's going to be happening. And I can put all this in the show notes for people as well. But if you want to just sign off with where to find you.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. I enjoyed it. People can find me on Instagram at the Littlest Flower Farm, or online at www.thelittlestflowerfarm.com. I'm mostly there. I think I have an abandoned TikTok account somewhere, Facebook.
Yeah.
I really only use Instagram, or on my website. And there's a contact me page on my website too, if you want to send me an email.
Yep, and definitely follow her on Instagram because, like she said, she's doing photography as well. And oh my gosh, especially the pictures of the dahlias that you post, so dreamy
Yes.
and so delicious just to scroll through and just get some good flower juices going. So
Yes.
yeah.
In my dahlia sale, I have my inspection with the ODA this week ahead. So I want to get past that hurdle, and I'll be announcing a date soon, hopefully in the next couple weeks. We still have freezing temps here in Bend through April. So really through June, but I plan to be able to ship the Dahlia tubers is at some point in April without the risk of freezing. So sale will be in March. Shipping will happen in April, and I encourage people to go onto my website and you can take a look at some of the tubers. I might have a bit available, and I'll be doing a final inventory pretty soon.
Yep, I got on her website a couple days ago and looked, and she has a lot of really amazing photos, obviously, but incredible varieties that are going to be available. So make sure to stay in touch so you can be the first one in to grab some pretty tubers. So, well, thank you again, Lindsay. This has just been such a treat, and I just adore you and adore visiting with you. So thanks for jumping in with me in our very first podcast.
Thanks, Lisa.